Welcome to TM Radio Broadcasting. My name is Frank Allen. We are live from Boston, Massachusetts. Today's date, Friday, May 10th, 2024. If you'd like to listen, dial +1 518 801 1318. When we are off the air, you can still listen on this line to past episodes 24 hours a day. If you have a question for myself or my guest, dial +1 617 987 8603. Tonight, we welcome Shiloh Taylor, targeted individual, 10-year veteran of government, and a TI activist. How are you tonight, Shiloh?
I'm doing well, I guess, minus the targeting.
Yeah,
How
we
are
can.
you?
I'm fine too, thanks. We can all do without the targeting. And what would you like to speak about tonight?
Well, what we spoke about last time, Havana syndrome, AHI, is getting some new traction in the government, also in the mainstream media. It's been put out there a lot recently, and there was a hearing on May 8th that attorney Mark Zaid, which of course is the attorney for the U.S. diplomats and law enforcement and the other people that have been affected by the Havana syndrome that work in the government. And there also is, of course, just wanted to mention the senator from Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson, who also seems to be affected by an incident of AHI, and he was looking forward also to this hearing because this hearing was really all of us can't talk about the elephant in the room that is doing the
Right, I
the
agree with that.
damage here. And so all of these reports just keep coming out and circling the drain saying, well, it's not a foreign actor, and it's not, just sort of not pointing the finger back at themselves, but in so many words it's obvious it's the CIA. And so there was more than one person who testified there, but most importantly, I guess people are most familiar with attorney Mark Zaid, and they had some other intelligence officers and different people testifying there. And so there was just some things. I watched it when it was live, and there was a couple things that I just observed about it, that there was, a lot of criticism, of course, of the reports that have come out saying that there's not technology or weapons that could create this type of brain injuries, and that it was, quote, provably untrue, and that they can do this type of brain injury with long-term concussion like some symptoms, and that there's more than one way, which I found that to be, which, a lot of targeted people know that, but for those who, absolutely are determined that there's just one way that they're doing this, there's not. There's many ways. Electromagnetic, microwave, there's lots of ways that can create this. And so I think this is, for those people who have different evidence, but their targeting is the same. This is a good thing, stating that there is not just one weapon that can do this, but it's pretty. The evidence in these reports, is not one that any of the intelligence agents or Congress are looking at that has any credibility. It's the quality of the info is not great. So this is just the government's just pushing forward the way that they always do with these type of things, where, like we talked about last time, where they don't have a code. And this was talked about on here, that they have money set up for these type of injuries, and they can't get the money to the people because of this code, which is the VA needs a diagnostic code. And some of this, of course, is just technical stuff that the government has to do to the hand needs to know what the foot's doing, and etc. But I do suspect that this is going to slide down eventually to citizens. But it's on its way, even though it's a slow train moving forward to this, because it's just very obvious to many people that it's the CIA, including when Zaid testified, that there was without a doubt incidents that had happened in DC, Virginia, and then down in Florida as well. And that it was a global campaign and a strategic issue. And they all agreed at this point, at least with the government and the diplomats, that it was the best of the best. It was not people. They were not targeting people that were just, you know, kind of hanging in there or whatever. They were targeting people strategically. And so I do think that plays a part into some of these, people that think they're targeted for specific reasons. They likely are. And
Could
I,
be.
I think that what are you targeted for?
Oh, no, I said it could be. I mean, different reasons.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I personally think that there's, if they want you to be quiet or they just have their different reasons. It's of course run by the CIA. They know who is. If you're a good activist, they don't want to hear from you. If you are, if you're a whistleblower, they definitely don't want to hear from you.
Definitely. I reviewed several segments of our last interview, and I have learned that you were correct on all aspects of the May 8th Homeland Security Committee. The only thing is, you did that 2 months ago. So your place within government for 10 years should be noted. To our listening audience, what do you suggest that we do next?
I do believe that this is pushing forward with the government as is. Everyone has to remember that your case is individual, and even if there are groups that are pushing forward with the case, every case is going to be your own. So continue to take any evidence that you can, including your testimony, write things down, especially the medical stuff. Keep track of the medical stuff, keep track of your own medical records as best you can. Make sure you are, at this point, I would attempt to try to get a diagnosis for Havana syndrome to push forward on this. The compensation is not very high right now for those who are, who worked for the government. But again, this is moving forward. You have to build a case no matter what you do. If you apply for Social Security, if you applied for disability, if you apply for any of these things, it's all just a case of evidence. So keep your evidence. Make sure it's about yourself as well. How that's affecting you, what happened with your symptoms, that sort of thing. Definitely keep a diary of that and keep your evidence because it's eventually going to come into play no matter who breaks through this first. These groups that are suing the government. I also think that as targeted individuals, we also need to band together and look at some other individuals outside of the government that, can be sued for this. For instance, Infraguard is a way bigger player in this for those who deal with the gang stalking and the hacking and the digital stuff, which is not everybody, but it's most everybody. And they play a huge part in it, which again, I didn't realize. I knew they played a part, but I didn't realize how much they played a part into it until the past couple months of research I've done on them. And that's how they're connected, where some lawyers are connected to the program and some are not, and some doctors are connected and some are not. And it's run through this Infraguard, which of course is like a quasi government type of a GMO that is really band together for another homeland security thing. They're there for security. They're paid patriots basically, but it's business executives, it's technology people, it's everyone, which explains how these people were all connected. I couldn't always figure out why certain people were connected and why some doctors weren't involved. Why are some and some not? It's this Infraguard, and then there's some manufacturers of some of these products and software that they're not untouchable. They're violating our rights, our human rights. There's lots of things, violations of privacy. There is, lots of these tech companies have stolen our data. There's lots of things, defamation, especially with the Infraguard is really doing defamation. They're not immune to these things, and we need to start looking at different ways other than just trying to go after the government, which of course is a piece of it. But these other, you know, things are set up on purpose so that we can't get it to them from Freedom of Information Act. the FOIAs don't work with them, then they just can continue to run through these black budgets because then they're just run, as one large item to this security company. And then they use private investigators and they that misuse their private investigator licenses. And it's a big true conspiracy that they are not immune to being sued.
Right.
And so, again, I'm not an attorney, but I know how to be a pain in the ass working for the government for 10 years.
I bet.
And so there are some other options that we should look into as a group of targeted individuals, either class action lawsuits or lawsuits of some sort that holds these other quasi GMO companies that are violating our rights. And a lot of the tech platforms are as well.
Right. I'd just like to interject that it would seem like today that everyone that is trying a case before the court system is going after the terrorist screening database or the TSDB, I believe. I can tell you why that will not succeed. We may be on this watch list. The federal government, however, will not release it, as it would serve to make aware real terrorists, U.S. agents, U.S. undercover people that are on the list. Now, does this seem to you to be a logical course to take for a class action lawsuit?
It's not going to be touched through discovery and through the normal ways. I don't, to me, I don't know if I can speak for, success on a lawsuit. I don't think that a lawsuit is going to get access to the list through discovery. I think it's going to have to be hacked or, somebody who has access to this list leaking the information in some way. Because I don't think that, because they have a case that was in front of the Supreme Court where they moved the guy around. He was like an American citizen and they moved him from the different categories of the list. And so when you start to be onto them about that you're on the no fly list or you're on these lists and then you sue the government, they just move you into another category where they can't get you. And so they're like, oh,
Right.
but you can fly now. It doesn't matter. And so that was, the point that it's not a moot point, that it does matter that, they can't be doing this. But until we break through on this TSDB list, I do agree with you that they're not going to obtain the list
Right.
through discovery.
This
It's
could
not going to happen.
perhaps even be life endangerment to a person who has this list. If it is downloaded on someone's computer, that person is in danger. And anybody who even thinks that that's not true, call the station now. We'll discuss it. Go ahead, Shiloh.
They just have such a lock on all of that information. I mean, if you do have access to that and plan to leak it, expect to leave the country. I mean, Assange is the best example of that. He didn't actually do that, but those, like, Snowden, of course, and then what's her name, the one that leaked the CIA's. She's got an oddball name.
I know who you
I can't
mean.
think of her.
The director,
What's
correct?
that?
The director?
No, she's a younger girl. She
Okay.
did some jail time, but she leaked like one document to like the Intercept. Reality Winner is her name.
Okay.
And
All
so
right.
they just kind of make an example, like she printed it and they knew that she had printed it. And so I think that that's the thing with these records that are classified, especially top security, they just have such a hold on it that if somebody does leak it or get anywhere with it, they're able to stop that. And then from the FBI agents who have talked about the targeting, that they immediately, if they are going to whistleblow, they immediately go after them and their family. Like immediately, they just financially destroy everybody, and you can't even get to be a whistleblower with the way that the FBI has a whole handle on the whistleblower lines and so I don't know. I mean, to get a hold of they won't tell on themselves because of that reason.
That's a good point. Now, just released on May 8th, as we've been speaking of, the Homeland Security Congressional hearing on AHI, or anomalous health incidents. They did share a ton of information, but there is still evidence from my point of view of a cover-up. Right before your eyes as you watch it, you can see the cover-up. What do you think?
I definitely agree. There were some quotes that I wrote down that were just as I was listening to it, just about that these weapons, not only was it strategic who they were, looking for doing this, who were targets, that was really disturbing to me was that the types of weapons were deemed, and this is a quote, achievable, feasible, and not expensive to manufacture. So it was just indicating that there was no reason that we shouldn't believe that they had, other people had these weapons, more countries, police forces, agencies, special interests. It, to me, that was a little bit more terrifying, was just how available these weapons were, and that they were sort of, even if they try to blame it on Russia, that Russia has, already stated that they started working on these weapons in the 80s because they believed that we were already using them on the Russians themselves. And so we're already way ahead of all of these other countries with these weapons. And then there was like an exchange that went back and forth between like the chairman and the people that were testifying and asking, like, why would the government conceal these weapons that were used? And then they were like, that if it's better explained in a classified realm, that it was that it was highly unlikely it was a foreign actor. And then they kind of questioned the intent of it, like, because it's inconsistent with the classified record, did they have a legitimate reason to mislead the public? And so the assumption is that they are definitely misleading the public, but do they have a good enough reason that they're doing it? I guess you could hide behind national security that you need to mislead the public, but they're definitely misleading us. That came out, I believe, in that.
Most definitely. The CIA seemed to be the entity that was responsible for the cover-up. This is according to the majority of witnesses present. And I think that in the future, like, they're going to go behind closed doors, obviously with no coverage, and they are going to discuss this at length. And I think a lot of things are going to come out about the targeted / Havana syndrome / AHI community. And there will be much talk and a lot of things happening all at once. That's my take on it. Go ahead, Shiloh. You've got the floor.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Things are definitely moving forward on this. I do think that the CIA does need to stop trying to point the finger at nobody. I mean, they're not even. It's just sort of like, we don't know. It's nothing to see here. But that, one of the intelligence agents, that the Russian intelligence agents, was saying that if Russia really is responsible for this, it will encourage Putin to escalate these. Like, if it really is Russia, it really is China, and especially with Putin himself, that if they don't come clean on this, they're making it more harmful. And then, going, is this an act of war? And to everyone else, like, I guess the civilians were sort of like, if they have been chomping at the bit to go to war with Russia and China, if there was any doubt in their mind, if there was any smidge of evidence saying that it was actually Russia, it is an act of war, and they would be on it, and they're not.
Well,
and so I think that speaks enough.
I think the current administration has demonstrated cowardice in terms of foreign policy. They ran out of Afghanistan. Literally, they ran. You recall the scenes on major news. I mean, there were people actually clinging to the tires of the planes when they were leaving. But it's a terrible thing that has happened in this country. But there is cowardice in this administration that has to go. We need a strong president who can lead us. And I'm not going to get into a totally political discussion, but the only nation state accused of AHIs was in fact Russia. And that was particularly a group known as GRU Unit 29155. Our newsletter 2 weeks ago, I think, brought that up. And this group is finding impact and will impact your current threat assessment of the TI community, because this is totally unbelievable. They received commendations from Vladimir Putin. So that's incredible. So we have very good intel. That's one thing we do have. Our intel is neither Democratic nor Republican. It is American. Okay, go ahead, Shiloh. I don't want to take your time.
Sure, and I agree. I think the issue is that the cat's been out of the bag for a long time. And the US is always on the front of the technology and the paying for it. And so China and Russia have been, like you mentioned, there is that was a special unit that was set up specifically for Russia to move forward on these weapons. They do have evidence of, there being Russian equipment and Russian agents that were in the area. And if anybody watched the 60 Minutes, there is another attorney, a targeted attorney, that has evidence of Chinese nationals that are doing the same thing.
Exactly.
It's not just the CIA that's doing it to Americans. It is also these other agents that are doing it. I do think that it's not just one person, and it's not just one way that they're doing this with one type of weapon that's done specifically through a satellite and all this. No. There's other things. First of all, the classified, top secret classified information that I got that was not classified was that they had laser guns that had this ability. So to me, this is not, there's not just one way they're doing this. They have vans. There's been people, they saw vans fleeing these things. These, all of this evidence that other targeted individuals that have had that are like, no, these are individuals in a van. That information is coming out to be actual evidence in other cases. And other nationals from, again, Russia and China. So it's that. And then there's also, I think the biggest piece to this is also that we're still guinea pigs in this. This is still a military industrial, contractor experiment at this point. This is not an investigation. So if we're on a list for, being investigated, their investigation is long over with. They know exactly what's going on. It's an experiment at this point, and that's why they're going to end up having to compensate everyone, because the United States is notorious for doing unconsented medical and military experiments on their own citizens. This is not their first time doing this.
That's for sure. And then we have the other aspect. Now, do you believe, okay, we'll say a person travels all the way to Morocco and still is attacked. A person travels from the U.S. to the U.K., we'll say. Their attack follows them. So this is a totally different situation than what was brought up by the committee. The committee mentioned a small dish, okay, with something the size of a backpack. Now, this is not going to get on a plane. It's going to get thrown off the plane. So there are a different scale, we'll say, of attack systems. Now, I have no doubt that this device that was mentioned is being used, but it is being used in conjunction with other devices. And you can look back to the Russian woodpecker And they are claiming that this device is still being used, naturally refined. Now, we still have thousands of reports of the Havana syndrome, with dozens of cases still officially considered unexplained. The investigation continues, and new evidence suggests a top secret link between the attacks in Tbilisi, Georgia, and a top secret Russian intelligence unit, which I've already mentioned, which is 29155. Lieutenant Colonel Greg Edgren, who led the Pentagon investigation, is confident that Russia is behind these attacks, part of a worldwide campaign to neutralize U.S. officials. Go ahead, Shiloh.
I definitely think that Russia is behind it. I do think that China has some agents. I do think my opinion still is that the vast majority is the United States government against its own citizens. I don't believe the United States is likely.
Go ahead, Shiloh.
Sorry, I moved and hit the mute.
I
So
do
I
it
was
all.
talking.
Go ahead.
But
do it all
I
the
do
time.
think I do think the majority of the citizens are targeted by the United States government of some sort, a piece of the most like, stemming from the CIA, but most of the executive branch is dealing with the civilians. But it doesn't make sense that the United States CIA is targeting its own CIA unless it's a retaliatory thing against employees or superiors, or that they're not going to target their own in that situation. They're going to target either their own citizens as a medical experiment, military experiment. But if the diplomats, it makes sense that Russia and China are targeting our diplomats. It doesn't make sense that we're targeting our own diplomats. It makes sense that we are targeting our own civilians.
Exactly. Okay, Shiloh,
But that's just my opinion.
we're going to go to commercial. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Welcome to TIEvents.org, your official insider for the targeted individual community. As the go-to source for all TI events, we're here to keep you in the loop with the latest and greatest happenings. Discover daily conference calls, meetups, and exclusive events across the USA, all at your fingertips. Plus, planning a TI event? Advertise with us for free and connect directly with the TI community. TIEvents.org is not just a website. It's your gateway to a world of information, connection, and empowerment for TIs everywhere. TIEvents.org, your official insider. Dive in and discover today.
Okay, Shiloh, we're back from commercial. I'm told that in the very near future we'll have about 10 minutes of commercials that we'll have to distribute. But that's fine. Tonight all we have is the one. Okay, well, you can pick up where you left off. I should play the commercial again later or somebody's going to get upset. But yeah, go ahead.
And I believe I was just talking about how the Russians targeting our diplomats makes sense, but that the CIA cover up is that they are targeting many civilians, just in my opinion. But I do agree with the testimony of who you spoke about, Grossoff, I think that was his name.
Oh, Lieutenant
Edginen.
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel. Yes.
Yes, I did agree with him.
Yeah.
I did, like the explanation of some of the intelligence officers explaining the technology and how that it worked, that it was confirmed for targeted individuals, things like that their pets are getting zapped. Like that was, that has happened to other diplomats. That's not just with targeted individuals. I've been lucky enough that I don't think that's happened with my pets, not at this point, but they basically, some of these weapons bathe the living quarters with microwaves and other, electromagnetic waves. And that
Correct. Yeah.
also they were talking about them coming in and drugging people in the night, and some of these other things. That there's many TIs that have similar stories. It's just that it's one of those things that people really don't want to acknowledge. They don't want to acknowledge that people are going into your home when you're gone. There's sneak and peek ways of going into people's houses, and then the terrifying that they're coming in and drugging people at night. That was acknowledged in this. I don't know if you caught that at the very beginning. And
Right.
that there was also a quote from, and I think it was Grossoff. He was saying that this was purposely made so people would feel like they were imagining it. That was the words.
That's exactly what they can do. That they have done similar things to me that were actually hypnotic, in my opinion. And I think when all is told, my opinion will be heard again. Attorney Zaid is representing all the diplomats. We know that. Now, I believe the targets have tried to reach him, but to no avail. Why wouldn't Mr. Zaid, or why would Mr. Zaid refuse to take on more clients, such as AHI victims? Why do you think he wouldn't do that?
I think probably because the wheels are still turning to get the diplomats money and to get these codes in. Next will be, of course, the veterans. Once they get that code in there, the veterans will be able to claim on this. I do think it's going to be a lot easier for people to sue once one of these things goes through. The government, is moving forward on of course, these microwave injuries, but there's a lot bigger to the targeting program that some people who don't have the microwave weapons and these other things, that's where I think they need to continue gathering evidence on this. Because again, the targeting program's big. Not everybody gets V2K. Not everybody gets I don't necessarily get a lot of V2K. I've had it here and there, but I get mostly the headaches and different other types of suppressive things, which is the government's setting up right now for that.
I see.
And
Yeah.
then the targeted list, like you're talking about, is kind of another. There's more than one piece to this. And so that's why I don't think that just one lawsuit or one law changing is going to be able to tackle this whole issue. It will help. It will become easier to sue is what will happen. And so when that happens, I believe he will open up his firm to other types of civilians. And I thought he had not answered me, but they did answer me and say they're not taking civilian cases at this time. But I would hope that when they move forward with civilian cases, myself and others that are considered to be civilian cases would be able to be seen by him as an attorney. But if one of these lawsuits is won, it will just become easier. Those who have these injuries, like the way they have
Right.
injuries that people have, where they have lawsuits that have legal precedents, we will be able to file our own lawsuits. But people shouldn't think that have like a hero, that one person or one group's going to be able to just take this whole thing down. That's not realistic. This is a lot bigger than that.
Right.
But it would help those who have been affected in the medical sense to get some compensation for the injuries that we have all sustained.
Exactly. Now, we have been in this fight now for decades and decades. And we have the Frey effect going all the way back and proven in 1974 1974, later appearing in print in 1975 for the public. Um, there is just no way that this is going to go away now. That's what I'm just overjoyed with. There's no way they can get away with this any longer. It's just going to keep coming out and coming out and coming out. That's what I'm seeing everywhere. And I can see Mr. Zaid's point. He has taken on the diplomats. Now, all of a sudden, a new group of thousands of people come in, and they're going to step back and say, what's this, And I am sure that they must have an inkling or know all about us already, because they have held back a lot of symptoms that the diplomats have. And one of these symptoms is the fact that it doesn't go away. That's the first symptom. The second one is actually voice to skull. That's one that won't go away. And I think you and I know it. I've had it for almost 13 years now. And I'll tell you what, I'm sick of it. But some of the symptoms they do have are dizziness, fatigue, memory problems, impaired vision, cognitive difficulties. These are all things that we are familiar with and we have been experiencing for years, decades and decades. We have some targets, probably not alive anymore, that were targets for 40 years, 50 years. And none of this fancy gear was around back then. There were only a few things. We didn't have the satellite technology that we have today. We didn't have anything. But that's for another show. We'll go into that. Okay, where would you like to go from here?
Hopefully, we get some relief from these things that you're talking about. I guess maybe I would like to talk about where can we go? Some of these things that are, from the government end. Me personally, the project that I'm working on is to try to get on the front end of some of these things, on the lobby end of the government, to try to raise some of the compensation for this, to lobby that citizens are put in. If we want to get a better package out of this, if we want to really get compensated for the full medical and for damages that they've done with this and all of the work that they've taken away from us from the years that we haven't been able to work, we need to get on the lobby end of this. And the political action end of this. It's really important that we don't wait until it is really, so far down and they give us some little crappy little package that, is not going to cover our medical bills, and it's not going to cover what they've actually done. So if we band together and put some lobby efforts into, number one, stopping the program, cutting the budgets to these programs, getting compensation for people who have already been affected, making sure there's neuro rights and that these weapons are banned in some way, shape, or form. It needs to be put in one of these treaties that it's a war crime, especially those that have been going on its own U.S. citizens. But these are not things that are, and still even diplomats is still pushing the bounds of war crimes. But the world needs to address these new weapons. And so again, on the lobby end, looking for neuro rights, bans on these weapons, more compensation for citizens on this. And then again, there's other pieces of the program that need to be addressed on the policing end, which is the way that the federal government is giving these weapons and these tanks and militarizing our local police departments, and that they are way overreacting to little things. And that's part of this terrorist list that needs to be addressed on the the policing end, which is now being highly militarized, and they're also having access to these military weapons for the purposes of crowd control and activist control. Essentially, is those that are activists that get these headaches and that have this, they're trying to stop you from being an activist. That's what these were even designed for, some of these. And they're in the specs of if you go into the government, where they're in their budget information, they just talk about that. These directed energy weapons were designed for crowd control. They started, doing some of these things with sound waves and different things. So again, my point is we just need to get on the front end of the government, on the lobby end, and then those representatives that are not representing us, that are not doing us any good, we need to remove them.
That's right.
And
that's exactly
so,
right.
Yeah.
There are so many, it's in the Constitution, right down to the President of the United States. If he is not doing his job, we, the people, have the right to remove them. And that's something that should take place. And why some of the people in the current administration are still there is beyond belief. I just cannot understand it at all.
I'm really cutthroat about this. I think all of the cabinet positions, all of the administrative, those that are appointed, and including the judicial branch, those are all appointed. Well, not all of them, but most of them are not voted in. Most of the judicial branch is appointed by legislators. And so it's not, they're purposely passing laws knowing that they're unconstitutional, leaving it to the black robes, they're calling them, to check and balance them. It's just a system gone wild where they're not accountable to we the people anymore. And that's why we have ended up here, is that, people, there's nothing about this whole scenario that you can't just look at it and say, that's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to do unconsented medical and military experiments on your own people.
Oh, well, that's not a good way to get elected back into office. If you're an incumbent.
And funding it fully.
Yeah, and funding it fully. It's crazy what's going on, but we're going to find the answers soon. I believe that the United States government and Mr. Ed Green, Lieutenant Colonel Ed Green, I think that
yes.
He is really going to dig into this. And we have so many other people actually that are already digging into it in our behalf, actually.
He stated something about him, if he could go into whatever they call those little classified rooms, that he could provide names, addresses, information, where they were at, and who to subpoena immediately.
That's fantastic.
It sounded to me like he knows exactly what's going on.
Most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. Many of them do. Many of them are bound by things such as gag orders. I believe I asked you that last time we did an interview. And many people cannot speak. They cannot speak out. If it was me and I knew, I would be speaking out. I don't care if I was jailed for 1,000 years. I would still speak out. Because this is a crime against humanity. It's genocide. All I will say is this. The Nazis took the Jews, but it was over in 1945. It didn't continue on and on for decades. It stopped for them. Some of them not in a good way. But it stopped for them. This continues. It's continual torture with no end in sight. Every morning you wake up and your first question is, are they still there? and it's answered immediately with them cackling in the background. Go ahead, Shiloh. I didn't mean to take your time.
No, I think that this security committee just reiterated a lot of things that you're talking about, and that other TIs, the similar stories of that. And I just, as you were talking, I looked into my notes about what Zaid said specifically, and it just describes exactly what you're talking about. And he said that he was shown an unclassified NSA memo that described, and he said, quote, a high power microwave system weapon that was meant to weaken, intimidate, and kill an enemy over time without leaving any evidence. These weapons are designed to eventually kill us.
Right. And the attacks on animals, I know where that came from. There was a diplomat, a woman in China, and she had two beautiful dogs, and they were attacked as well. That must have been around Beijing. I'm not quite sure where the American embassy is, but I believe it's in Beijing.
And them acknowledging that there was more than one way and more than one weapon. That's always been mine. It doesn't matter how you receive these injuries or which weapon or which systems, or it doesn't matter. You've received them because of this. They've done something to you with these weapons. And so that does explain, though, that why there's a lot of similarities, but then there are differences. For example, I've had headaches and different things, but my pets, I'm not aware of my pets suffering from that. It doesn't seem like that. But then there are other people I've seen on film and other TIs that talk about them torturing their pets, and that they have, the physical evidence of it. And so it just shows that there's definitely more than one way that they're doing this, because if they were putting microwaves throughout my entire place and not just zapping my head, because I get the little not only do I get the headaches, but I also notice that when I get the headaches, I also get scalp burns. And so it's like they're targeting directly my head somehow. And so
Exactly.
again, it's not affecting the cat and the dog that sleep in the bed with me. I did have some more observations that happened when I was watching the Homeland Security, which was just that there was a lot of things that were mentioned for targeted individuals that reiterated many of the things that we've all been talking about. I don't think once this moves forward with the diplomats and law enforcement that it will be a difficult case for civilians to prove, just because they're too similar. And again, the differences are only in types of weapons or types of ways the end means are the same. The same type of injuries are created by these different type of weapons. But there was lots of quotes in there that, especially that, they're made to feel like that we can imagine that, and that it was this people's pets were involved, and just that there was more than one way. And just the fact that they just keep hiding behind the classified piece of this to give us all the information lies in this classified. So hoping again that the colonel will be able to give the information on who to subpoena, where they work, where their addresses are.
I'm
This is
back.
an issue. Okay, I just kept going because I figured there didn't need to be a gap. So I was just
Nope.
talking about the security committee
No,
hearing.
that's fantastic. Yeah, we momentarily lost our secondary reel-to-reel, so that's the old backup. So we've got that back now, so that's great.
Was that a targeted thing or just a random?
Well, it could be an old breaker that needs to be replaced, but we could do that. It's modernized, but yeah, it could have been. Target the backup recording system. That's always a good shot.
Yeah, they do like to interrupt When things come out about them they don't like, they like to interrupt calls and interviews.
For sure. Yeah, I'd like to, briefly just go into China again. There was a woman over there, her name escapes me, but her life was totally destroyed. Her mother was also attacked, and I believe her father while she was there, along with her two dogs. And I remember covering that and bringing it to the community's attention, actually. And that was a terrible, terrible attack. You could not walk in the room, as I recall, without feeling it. So I don't know what's up with these people, but they're coming down. And if you could, you've got plenty of time, could you give us a closing thought, if you would? Because it's getting to be, believe it or not, I looked down, I couldn't believe the time. A closing thought for you, Shiloh. What do you think you'd like to do?
I guess people just continue to keep the faith. Whatever your faith is, just keep the faith. It's especially people who've been targeted for a really long time. It's hard at this point to believe that this is going to break, but I do believe that it is breaking. It is, there are many, many cracks in this program right now, and that especially coming from the government experience that again mentioned on your last call, like Agent Orange and different things. This is unfortunately the way that the government claws its way through these situations with all of the different agencies. So it's definitely, the train is moving forward on the anomalous health incidents, which again, of course, are the Havana syndrome and the neurostrike type of weapons. And so I do think that there needs to be hopefully some sort of movement on the other type of targeting, the smear campaign, the financial stuff that they do. It's all tied together, but hopefully that once this train is moving, it will all move forward to be able to close out this program and defund it, really is what is the easiest way to get at it. Defund it and stop these and move forward on lobby on the front end of this so that we're able to stand up for ourselves before these things are already, full blown weapons that are in a, 10-year trial period already. So hopefully just looking forward to getting some legislation done on the front end. For example, the information that you sent me, this Neural Rights Foundation, for us, that we not only get relief for the suffering that many of us have been going on, you're talking decades, get relief for that, compensation, healthcare, and then stop this program from moving forward.
Very
I
good.
believe it's possible.
I think after I saw that particular interview on the 8th, I knew right then and there that this was coming to an end. I can see light in the tunnel now, and it's not a train. But I would like to thank you very much for coming on the air once again, and I'm sure that'll happen many more times. And I would like to thank our listening audience, and I would like to say good night from Boston, Massachusetts. My name is Frank Allen.